Welcome back to the daily Rambam. We are up to the 10th chapter of the laws of Tum'as Mace, of impurity that comes from a dead person. Let's start with, even though I usually do this on Thursday, maybe I'll very briefly show where we're up to the Rambam. We are learning the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, and we are in volume number 10 out of 14. It has 144 chapters. And it has how many topics? 8 topics. First, we're on the first topic, which is impurity that comes from the dead. There's 25 chapters of that. And today we will be learning chapter 10. Let's take a look. Actually, before we take a look, we could look back at the slideshow for a moment, and we'll actually see a breakdown of these 25 chapters on impurity of the dead. So the first 5 chapters spoke about what types of impurity of the dead, what is significant enough to impart impurity to her, and what is significant to be able to receive impurity. The next 5 chapters spoke about impurity of the grave, and we'll be concluding that discussion, please God, today. Tomorrow we'll be moving on to impurity of the land of the nations, land outside of Israel. And then there'll be about a week discussing the impurity that comes about by oihel, by a canopy. And finally, another approximate week talking about when you are under the same roof as Tumah, what can serve as a barrier to prevent items from becoming Tameh. So these are the 5 general discussions that exist through the 25 chapters of impurity of the dead. This breakdown is not from the Rambam itself, but I have it here just to help us see where we're up to. Today we're going to discuss more about the grave.
One chapter.
Chapter 10. So what is meant by Beis Hapras? We mentioned and told our Beis Hapras. What is a Beis Hapras? A Beis Hapras is a place where a grave was plowed over. And actually, it's not talking about a grave that was buried all the way under the ground. It means one that was, I think, on surface level. I'm not sure. We'll see. At least we'll see it in a moment. That earlier we spoke about a grave. On Thursday we spoke about a grave that was lost in the field, and there we said that you can't plant trees because trees dig deep, roots deep, and they might come to the grave that's deep below the earth. But you can plant vegetables because the vegetables don't go too far down. Today we're going to learn the exact opposite, because here we're not speaking about a grave that was lost in the field. Rather, we're talking about a grave that was plowed over, and now we're worried that as the plow continued to drive along, as that tractor continued to move along the field, it may have caused the dead body to be scattered throughout the field. And therefore, here we're going to say that surface level is a problem, as opposed to if it's deep below the soil, it's not a problem, because at that point it would be below wherever the plow would have caused the dead body to have been scattered. Let's see this inside. So a Beis Hapras is a place where a grave was plowed over. Since in such a situation the bones of the corpse are crushed and dispersed throughout the field, our sages decreed that any field where a grave was plowed over is impure, because we don't know what happened. If there was a grave and it was plowed over, so the entire field is treated as impure. This applies even if I'm plowed over a coffin. So it means it wasn't just the body actually had a coffin. And therefore, surely the plow wouldn't have broken through the coffin. Or even if the corpse was placed under stone tablets or rocks. In fact, not like what I said 2 minutes ago, even if there are 2 stories high of earth above a coffin, even if it was buried about 10 meters under the ground, since one plowed over the grave, the field is considered as Beis Hapras. And my understanding for the rationale for this, without looking into the commentaries, is probably because when the rabbis instituted a decree, after they said lo klug, we're not going to start making a separate exceptions for every unique case. Rather, we'll give a general rule and stick to it, even if in certain circumstances it doesn't seem like that concern is there. How large an area is considered as a base pras, meaning when that plow plowed over the grave, how far will it make the field impure? 100 amos by 100 amos. We said an amo is about half a meter. So we're talking about 50 meters by 50 meters. We're talking about 50 square meters from the place of the grave. All of the square, which is an area of which 4 sa'ah grain can be sown, that's the, if you want to measure it in that way, that's all becomes referred to, or it all has the halacha of a base hapras. It's earth. By the way, base literally means a home or house, housing, and pras means, pores means to spread out. So we're talking about even a base over here doesn't mean a bayit, a house, but it means an area where the body may, the tumah may have been scattered, and therefore it is all impure. It's earth imparts impurity when it is touched or carried, as we explained. It does not impart impurity because of oil. Similarly, one who stands over a base hapras is pure. I think the reason for that is maybe because once it gets scattered, it may be very small pieces which are too small to impart impurity. But I didn't look into this. If one began to plow and plowed over a grave, and while continuing to plow, before he completed a distance of 100 amos, of about 50 meters, he shook out the plow or knocked it against a rock or a fence. You can just imagine seeing a bulldozer occasionally, I don't know if you've seen, they kind of bang it, and they shake out everything that's in it. He makes the field the base hapras only to that point. The remainder of the 100 cubits are pure, because he did not reach it while continuing to plow. He's already shaked out any remnants that he may have been dragging along with him. If he plowed 50 cubits or more, and then continued plowing until he completed the 100 cubits, so he plowed and paused and continued, then the entire area is considered a base hapras because he didn't shake out the plow. But if he continued plowing beyond 100 cubits, then that's already pure, because the bones in the grave will not be carried more than 100 cubits. Obviously, nothing's impossible, but when the rabbis instituted this decree, they went by the way things would usually be, and they followed those guidelines. We operate under the assumption that bones that were buried are human, unless it is known that they came from an animal. Conversely, what's the difference between human bones and animal bones? Maybe we'll discuss. There's a few differences, but the most obvious difference is that human bones cause anything that's in the same canopy to also become impure, as opposed to animal bones don't. Conversely, we operate under the assumption that any bones that are openly revealed are from an animal unless it is known that are humans. So again, as long as it's a buried bone, we assume it's from a human, and therefore it has a stronger source. It's the strongest source of impurity. As long as it was not buried, it was just on the ground, we go under the assumption that it's from an animal unless we know that it's from a human. So this is about machzikin. What do we assume until, what's the status quo? That's really the question. Okay, when there was a trench filled with human bones, or there were bones piled on earth, and one plowed these bones together with a field, or one plowed a field in which a grave was lost, or one in which a grave was discovered, a base hapras is not created. While sages deemed impure only a field in which a grave whose identity was definitely known was plowed. So it needs to be specifically a grave. That's where the rabbis instituted it. So even though logically there's a possibility that this may happen, it's not for us to be concerned. Generally, if it's not, unless we know it's impure, it's pure, unless the rabbis instituted a decree. And the decree was specifically about plowing over a grave. Similarly, when one plows the body of a corpse together with a field, it is not deemed a base hapras. The rationale is that all these are uncommon situations, and our sages instituted their decree only with regards to a field that was plowed, for this is a common situation. When a person plows a grave in a field that does not belong to him, he does not make that field into a base hapras. First, because a person cannot cause an article that does not belong to him to become forbidden. Hurst? Even a partner, a sharecropper or Gorian does not create a base pras. When a person plowed over a grave in a field which belongs to him and to a colleague as one, he does create a base pras, but only in his portion, but not in the portion belonging to his colleague. So this is quite a strange phenomenon, because logically speaking, the plow moved, and whatever damage it would have caused to the one would have caused to the other. But the Torah tells us that you can't cause something that doesn't belong to you to become forbidden. So therefore, your field, that now is deemed impure. But your friend's field is pure, even though it was the exact same action. So although logically there's just as much probability, the Rabbi said that a man does not cause something that's not his. We don't have the jurisdiction to take somebody else's item and cause it to become tameh. When a Gentile plows a grave in his field, he does not create a base pras, because the concept of a base pras does not apply to non-Jews. This is something that the rabbis only instituted regarding Jews. Although the non-Jew was plowing in his very own fields, the whole law of a base pras doesn't apply to him. When there's a field which is a base pras above, and the field which is pure below, and rain washed the earth from the base pras to the pure fields, right? We have in our garden a little area where the landscaping, where it's higher, and then a little further down it goes down, and just at that landscape we recently pulled out something that was growing over there. I don't remember what it was exactly, but we wanted to take it out, and ever since the grass hasn't moved in there, and every time it rains the whole lower area is just filled with earth in that vicinity, because that's what happens when it rains. So if the upper field, we said that the base pras is basically the earth that's on the top layer, which we'll speak more about. So if it rains, and you know that the earth now all just got washed straight into the lower field, so you know that that very same earth that was impure above is now below. Yet, what do we say? The lower field remains pure. Why? Because again, the rabbis only instituted it under the exact framework that they instituted it. These laws apply even the earth of the lower field was red and it became white, or it was white and it became red. So factually, scientifically, you know that the earth that's now sitting in the lower field was the very earth that before caused impurity. The rationale is that a base pras does not make a second base pras, and impurity was decreed only on the earth in its original state. Okay, now, so what can we do in this field? I touched upon this a little earlier. David, I'm glad you made it. We're entering into a new discussion now. We've determined the base pras is a field that was plowed over, and now we want to know what can be done in this field. What is it allowed to be used for, and what's it not allowed to be used for? A field in which a grave was plowed over. So you're allowed to plant any tree or bush at a base pras because their roots extend below 3 handbreadths. So that's about, I think it's about, how much is it, Tepach? I think 8 centimeters. So the thickness of earth, how much earth may have the bones mixed into it from the plow, up to 3 tvachim, which would be about 25 centimeters. But a bush or a tree digs its roots deeper than 25 centimeters. And therefore, that's fine. You can plant them there because they're not going to be growing from the area where these bones are. For the bones from the grave are spread out over the surface of the field. We do not, by contrast, sow in any seeds from which grow crops that are not reaped. Meaning any crop that you'll need to pull out rather than cut. Kind of like the way you weed your field, right? You could either just cut it and the weed will come straight back. But if you pull the weed out, you get the little bulb underneath. So that would be a problem in a base pras, because when you pull up your carrots or whatever it is, you're going to be raising the bones as well that were scattered. If one sowed crops in such a field and did harvest them by uprooting them rather than just trimming them, one actually must collect the grain heap in that field and sift the grain with 2 sifters. And if one grew beans with 3 sifters, lest one find a bone the size of a barley corn. Even the tiniest bone of a person causes impurity. You would not want this impurity to enter into all of your food. One must burn the chaff of the grain and beans there, just so you'd be able to see. This is a decree lest there be a bone the size of a barley corn amongst it. If one were allowed to benefit from the chaff, he would take it out of the field and sell it and thus spread the impurity. So again, what is the field used for? Either trees or bushes or plants that are cut, but not plants that are uprooted. And if he did uproot the plants, then he's going to actually have to sift through the earth that came out to ensure that he is not spreading the impurity. We don't want this virus to spread. When there's a field that is presumed to be a base of pras, we continue to operate under this assumption, even if it is large enough to grow 4 kor of grain. Even if it is to the side of a place of soft mud which is not plowed, and thus does not become a base of pras. Even if a pure field surrounds it on all 4 sides. So again, it's what the rabbis instituted, even when logically the likelihood seems very small. If it qualifies, it qualifies to be disqualified or to be impure. When a person discovers a field that has been designated and does not know what the nature of the problem is, so he sees that there's a sign here, there's an indication of impurity, but he's not sure what that sign exactly is saying. He's not sure what the problem is, right? It's like when you have an issue with your car, then you need to take it to the mechanic and he plugs into that computer. The computer will tell you exactly what the issue is. So here he sees there's a indication, there's some kind of sign, which we'll discuss in a moment, that's saying that there's something wrong with this field, but he's not sure what the problem is. He should follow these guidelines. If it has trees in it, so then he should assume that a grave was plowed over it, because we said in such a field at a base of pras, you're allowed to plant trees. So it must be that that wasn't the issue. If it does not have trees, he should assume that a grave was lost in it, as has been explained, that it was plowed over. The above applies provided there is an elder or a Torah scholar in this place, because not every person is knowledgeable as you guys are concerning such matters, and is not aware that it is permitted to plant to this type of field and forbidden to plant to that. So if you know that it's being somewhat monitored by a Torah sage or a daily Rambam participant, then you would know that if there was a tree there, then obviously it wasn't a field that had been plowed over, vice versa. If a person walked through a base of pras on stones that don't wobble under the person's feet when he's walking on them, or he enters into it when he is riding on an animal, on a person or on an animal of formidable strength, he's pure. Why? Because he's not, well, let's see the opposite. If, however, he walks on stones that usually shake while he treads upon them, even if he was careful and walked so that they would not shake, he's impure, as if he walked upon the ground itself. Similarly, if he was riding on a person who was not strong to the extent that his knees would start knocking against each other, the lower person, and his thighs would shake when he carried him, or an animal which was not strong to the extent that it would defecate when it carried him, he is impure as if he walked on the field with his feet. So only if he's using a car or item that's strong enough to hold him in its independent capacity, does that separate him from the field and allow him to remain pure. When a person purifies a base of pras, he needs to do so in the presence of 2 Torah sages. Maybe you guys would qualify. I mean, you're studying every day for like a year and a half. I think I've been a great presence of you. I'm honored. Anyhow, how exactly does he purify it? He gathers together all the earth that he can move from the surface of the entire field and places it in a sieve with small holes. He breaks the earth into small pieces and removes any bones that is the size of a barley cone. Alternatively, it is pure if he places 3 handbreadths of earth from another place above it, if he raises the ground level, or if he just removes 3 handbreadths of earth from the entire surface. So we're doing some serious landscaping over here. If he removes not so serious. If he removes 3 handbreadths of earth, I guess it's quite a bit, 25 centimeters. Yeah, that's a lot of earth. If you remove 3 handbreadths of earth from half the field and place 3 handbreadths of earth over the other half, it's pure. So that means if you had, here's the full field. So he basically, this hand is a little confusing because it's converse, but this hand, he got rid of earth. So now it's lower. And then this hand, he added earth, so it's higher. So the whole field is fine. This part is fine because now he removes the 3 handbreadths. And this part is fine because he's covered it by 3 handbreadths. But if he removed a handbreadth and a half from its surface, so he just moved it slightly down, and then added onto it another 1.5 handbreadths, then that doesn't help. Because the end result is that so he removed 1.5 handbreadths, so now it means that the bones are 1.5 handbreadths down. And then he added 1.5 handbreadths, so they're still 1.5 handbreadths down. So he didn't achieve anything. Similarly, if he leveled it and checked it from above and below while removing the rocks, if he just kind of shuffled the earth while leveling it to check what's going on, then his actions again are useless. The only way to do it is either to remove the earth or to add to the earth or to sift the earth. If he paved it with stones that wouldn't shake when a man walks upon it, it's pure. So if he decided to pave, then that's not a problem. Test yourself on this chapter. How large of an area is a base of pras? Is it 30 amos by 30 amos, 50 amos by 50 amos, or 100 amos by 100 amos?
I think it was 100. I think so. I don't remember now.
Any second takers? We said it's 50 amos.
50. Yeah.
And I am wrong, and you are right. It's 100 amos, which is about 50 meters. I told you guys are Torah scholars. I should be more intimidated in this presence.
100, 100, yeah.
Okay, moving on to question number 2.
I was paying attention.
Okay. If one plowed more than 100 cubits from the place of the grave, does it make the whole area a base of pras? Does the base of pras extend beyond 100 cubits? Yes. Since he did not stop plowing, the bones could have been brought the whole space where he plowed. Or no, we are not concerned that the bones were brought beyond 100 cubits.
I think yes.
Yes, I also agree.
I'm going to say no.
You probably wrong,
say that.
Clever.
Okay, if we were having a game over here right now, we'd be coming in 50-50. It'd be a tie. If one business partner plows over a grave in a field that they jointly own, does it make it a base of pras? Yes or no?
I would say yes.
I thought we said that only his portion, but not his neighbor's portion, but he doesn't give that option over here. Maybe because they jointly own the whole thing. So I guess that the answer is yes. No.
No.
Let's take a look over here. Let's take a look.
What?
Let's take a look.
Where's that? Oh.
When a person, let's look back at halacha number 5. When a person plows a grave in a field that does not belong to him, he does not create a base of pras. Because a person cannot cause an article that does not belong to him to become considered. Even a partner, a sharecropper, or a guardian does not create a base of pras. So it does say so clearly. Because it's not exclusive.
That's no.
We'll go back to the question in a second. When a person plowed over a grave in a field which belongs to him and to a colleague as one, so he creates a base of pras in his portion, but not in the portion belonging to his colleague. So this is what was catching me out. I guess this is specifically in a scenario where the portions were side by sides. It wasn't an equal ownership over the whole thing. Although it's a little confusing because he says it belongs to him and to your colleague as one.
Yeah.
No, so it must be. I think the translation is not so good. Sorry, apologies to the editors. Because I look at the Hebrew, Charash kever v'sadeh shaloi v'shel chaveiro ke'echad. Meaning he plowed a kever, a grave, in a field, in his field and his friend's field at once. The translation makes it sound like it belonged to both him and his colleague as one. I think the correct translation would be, if you plowed over a grave in a field that belonged to him and a field that belonged to his colleague, and he plowed both of those fields in one shot. So then we say his field becomes a Beis HaPras, and his friend's field does not become a Beis HaPras.
Yeah.
Okay. This was what was confusing me, this translation, as opposed to if it was the field that was owned in partnership,
Jointly.
it does not make his
No.
friend's field a Beis HaPras.
Okay.
Okay, that was question
I
number
don't know if
3.
the question was clear.
Okay. I think it was just a translation that was a little bit confusing. I think this is the halacha for this is clear now that we looked at the Hebrew. If one's business partner plows over a grave in a field that they jointly own, Rambam clearly said that he does not make it a Beis HaPras.
Right.
Because that's his friends as well.
Okay.
In which of the following cases does a field become a Beis HaPras? When one plows the body of a corpse, when a trench with human bones was plowed over, when one plows a field in which a grave was lost, or none of the above?
Does not make. Well, it doesn't become a Beis.
I think it's none of the above. I think it's only when he knows. I think it's a grave and he knows where it is.
None of the above, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.